Good morning, PSA. Wow, thank you. Well, that was like, Dave? Oh my gosh. Okay, one, you never have to clap for me. That's super generous, but I'm gonna show up anyways. I'm gonna pour my heart out anyways, just so you know that. PSA, 5 weeks ago, I stood on this stage and I talked about the idea of launching a new service that would reach people in a totally new way. And we didn't have a name for it, but we knew what it was gonna look like and feel like in our minds and in our hearts. And the day before we launched it, we were still questioning what it was gonna be called. We called it Dinner Service, and we launched it with total courage, no experience. We launched it, and by the generosity of many, by way of their expertise and their time and finances, we put out on the back patio behind the community room 6 farm tables and cooked for an anticipated amount of people that we did not know were gonna come. And for the last 3 weeks, our church has courageously guessed how many people God would bring to the table. And over the course of those 3 weeks, we've seen several hundred people come and explore both Torrey Pines Church, but more importantly, what a relationship with Jesus would look like. This picture is from our last week. That's Dr. Amanda Pavich, who graciously shared with our community. Director of Eastlake Leadership College, but more importantly, a member of our church who is giving of her time with the clarity that God is doing something big here. And I just want to share with you from my heart, like, you have absolutely no idea how proud I am of our church to step up in the way we did. Last Sunday, we hastily made 8 more farm tables, anticipating who God was going to bring to the table. Last week, in our 3rd week, we went, over 100 people came to have dinner and experience community at Torrey Pines Church with a message and belonging. And just as a little backstory, I don't know how long this service has been going on, certainly longer than I've been here, but this service averages roughly between 100 and 130 people a week. It's been happening for years, and in 3 short weeks, by the great anticipation of many, over 100 new people have stepped into our church wondering if Jesus is for them. So as the pastor here, I want to say thank you. Like, your generosity, your time, your expertise, your money, it is paying dividends forward for people to know and hear about Jesus. And if you want to know about the details, like what are the details of it look like, we have a volunteer team and several volunteers helping us cook a meal. They get here right after this service ends and they start the dinner prep. And then volunteers come an hour beforehand and they help set up the table and set up the lights, move the fire pits out, set the tables. It's as if we're having a wedding every single week. And I love weddings. I crash them all the time with my family. My parents taught me how to crash great weddings. So I love it. There's a family essence there that I'm so proud to provide. It costs us about $2.50 a person to feed. I'm super proud of that. You're like, how in the world do you feed people for $2.50? I say, we're brown. We can do it. We can crush it. You can't crush it the way our team crushes it. But here's the reality is, when we started this year, budget-wise, this vision was not on the table. And so committing to feeding people for the sake of knowing Jesus is something that we did not bargain for, but I'm inviting you to be a part of. So $2.50 times 100 people, roughly, if you are good at math, you just move the decimal once. It costs us about $250 for the meal side. Then you've got, plateware and stuff like that. If by the end of this conversation, or just your time here, if you're a part of Torrey Pines Church, you've been coming and you love it and you're a part of it, this would be a great way to see your generosity meet new people in Jesus' name. Just putting it out there, come serve. There are lots of opportunities to set tables up. If you feel comfy in the kitchen, like getting down and dirty and greasy, we can use your expertise. Like Jesus gifted you, come share that gift with many, many others. Sounds good? I love you. Thanks for being a church that innovates alongside of us. Yes. It's celebration worthy. Now let's move to today's conversation. pluralism, the end of our Isms series. I'm going to start with a survey. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 things that you can choose between. I need 100% participation, okay? I'm giving you the choice to vote between carne asada French fries, right? Carne asada French fries. Don't vote so quickly. You don't know what you're voting against. It could be like cleaning the toilets after service, okay? Carne asada French fries or California burritos. Ooh. Mingo, why? Why would you challenge us this deeply? Okay, so I need a vote. Ready? If you love California burritos, hold your vote. If you love carne asada French fries, now's the time to vote. Raise your hand, raise your hand. Okay. Oh, wow, we've got some carne asada French fry people. Yes, good. Some people are like, what is this carne asada fry you speak of? Okay, that's okay. Second vote, California burritos. California burritos. Oh, we got a split vote. We're pretty close. 8 o'clock was violent in their vote. 8 o'clock was like, boo, you're wrong, right? I had to like calm them all down. They were very adamant about their vote. But the reason why we take a vote is because what you determine as your favorite, what you determine as your preference, what you think is the best, is not and could not be first for somebody else. It doesn't necessarily equate to the preference of another, right? And as we're going to be talking about pluralism today, we've got to understand that in comparison of things, both can't be first. Both can't be true. Both can't be primary. Both as an answer provide and present a conversation. And in this room, that decision, carne asada French fries versus California burrito, those are the opinion of this room, but there are other things in life that aren't based on opinion. There's an absoluteness to them. That's what brings us to this conversation about pluralism. Aristotle that's right, I said Aristotle, right? I went from burritos to Aristotle. Follow me this morning. I'm like 5 deep in this cup of coffee. So Aristotle called this the law of non-contradiction, right? The law of non-contradiction, which is defined this way. It's impossible for anything at the same time to be and not to be. Okay, follow me here. It's impossible for anything at the same time to be and not to be. And this is super important to our conversation this morning. What is pluralism? Pluralism is given to us by the root word plural, which means multiple or many. And religious pluralism is summed up simply as all beliefs being equally valid and leading equally to one God or one destination. So, if we are going to have a conversation about pluralism, I think that there are 2 ways that we can respond. We've been talking about the Christ-like response in each of these isms. Today, we're going to get Jesus' response to a pluralistic community, but we're also going to see what Paul did in the book of Acts. And those are going to be things that we can apply to our own lives as we exist in a culture not too different from the culture that Jesus and Paul walked in. So I took a page out of the notes from Hosanna, who actually lent a ton of great resources to this conversation about pluralism, and I'm going to read it to you before we get in. It says this: you may not have called pluralism in the past. You may have called it universalism or maybe something else, but it is a growing belief system in our world today. Many of us here, I think, believe certain portions of it, and certainly many of our friends and our family hold to the idea of pluralistic truth. Pluralists, by definition, are fine not picking a religion or belief system and are okay with never deciding if one is right or if any of the others may, in fact, be wrong. And for the record, I actually think pluralism sounds awesome. It might be easier for me to talk about Jesus if all religions just eventually led to him. Such a great confession. But pluralism has a problem. And the problem is this: our world's major beliefs, our world's major religions, they do agree in certain parts on various points. Just like carne asada French fries and California burritos, one is cradled in a blanket-sized tortilla, right? The other is in an ocean-polluting, turtle-killing styrofoam. We know this, right? So if you voted carne asada fries, We're we know where you sit. Okay, so the bottom line is that many of our world's belief systems have similar attributes and traits. And one major theme that we know we have in common is that we believe that something is broken. Something is distinctly disconnected. Something is wrong with our human condition. And as Christians, we would identify it as sin. Sin is the problem, and we need a solution to that sin. Buddhists would say it would be something like suffering. And suffering is the problem that we need to solve. Now, having multiple belief systems in our world shows us, in fact, how hungry humanity is for God and how desperate we are for truth, how much we all long to solve and heal our human condition that we face day to day. This is something I think that we all agree on no matter what viewpoint you stand from. But the world's major religions also disagree on pivotal, I would say, fundamental viewpoints. So to say that they are equally true would pose major contradictions and would not give justice nor respect to any of those other faith systems. Now, shocker, my preference is to give justice and to give respect to other viewpoints of faith, not because I'm a good person, but because I see people, icons in the Bible do it also. Our job is to understand how and why. So, what is Jesus' response to pluralism? Here's a great thought as we get into this. Throughout this series, Isms, we've hit on racism, politicism, sexism, and pluralism may not be something that we think of or discuss as much as the previous three, but many times, honestly, it's just as much of a divider between God and his people. In some ways, it can actually be a bit scarier because it's so accepted and so under the radar. It doesn't come off like blatant hate or like marginalizing people the way that sexism or racism does. It comes off as love, seemingly like accepting that all religions are true, and this is the most loving thing somebody can do. The funny thing is that we're not the first society to think this way. And today, as we get into this conversation, we're going to look at claims that Jesus made of himself, and we believe Jesus was both man and God, fully both. And there are things that Jesus said about himself that no man can say. And we're going to start there because if you tune out mentally halfway through this talk, I'd rather you stick to the things that Jesus said, and then the second half of this be application in our own lives. Sounds good? Jesus starts with one major statement that distinctly divides him and separates him from all other claimed gods in all of history. Jesus claimed that he is the way and not a way. This is your first fill-in. Jesus claimed that he was the way and not a way. We find this in John 14:6. The evidence for that statement comes when Jesus answers to a group of people asking about who he is. He says this, I am the way and also the truth and the life. He says, nobody comes to the Father except through me. If you really knew me, if you really know me, you'll know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and you have seen him. This statement is an all-exclusive statement. Some people talk about the belief differences between religions, and Jesus, in fact, is being highly exclusive here. He's saying, I am the primary and single way that you can access a connection to God. It's his words, it's not my words. It's his statement of himself, and it's something that we have to wrestle with. And as I have had several friends through my entire life who have believed differently than me, this is a tension point that we must at least recognize and address. I don't know if you felt the tension around the holiday table, if you come together and, you believe differently than somebody else across the table, but Jesus declaring that he's the way and not just an option is something that you've got to hold to if you're going to walk with Jesus. And I always fall back on this idea. My parents live in a home that my grandparents built upwards of like 80 years ago in Mexico, actually in Ensenada, Mexico. My grandparents purchased a property on a hill in Ensenada, and they hand built, as they built their family, out of adobe bricks, room after room after room, as my grandparents had 9 daughters and 2 boys. And they started a small little house, a little casita, and they went boop, 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 right? Bedroom, 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 children, children, children. And as they built that place, my grandfather and his friends and family started, the way to that property was a dirt road when they built it. And they drove that dirt road so often, it was up a hill, a sharp right, and as you crest over the hill, it comes down halfway through the hill, and then that's my parents' property. And my grandfather drove it for 70 years as he lived and took pride in the property that he created for his family. And it wouldn't just serve my father as he grew up. He's the youngest of all of those babies. My dad spent like half his childhood dressed as a girl because his sister's just like, you're our play toy, right? So my dad was the youngest in that whole family lineup. He rode, before it was paved, my dad would ride his dirt bike up and down that road. My dad told me as we were preparing for this message, he said, I used to love riding that road in the 70s in the winter because it was all muddy, and I'd go to get groceries from my mom, and I'd come back, it was like full of dirt. And my dad said I was really bummed the day that the city paved it, because then it wasn't fun anymore. I'd ride up like, right, just up to the house. Now, if you went today to that house, there is only one way to my parents' house, my grandparents built. There's no other option for you to get to that house. You'll die trying to get to that house any other way. It's just the most dangerous way you could get to that house is by jumping over other people's properties. They'll like not welcome you. But for my parents, one road in, one road out. I see Jesus' exclusive statement as the road to my parents' house. Why? Because my parents love seeing their kids come to that house. And it's not an insensitive fact that that's the only way to that house. It's actually an imperative fact, right? You have to know which road to take to get to my parents' house so you can experience the goodness that I share with my dad and my mom. You can't take another road to get to that house. That's just a simple fact. I wonder if Jesus, when he said this, yes, it was a shocker, but to him, I wonder if it was normative. You want to spend time with my dad? You've got to come by way that my dad made. It's through me. I think we blow it up. We wonder that's so hard to perceive. And when I think about my house in Mexico, it's like, you got to turn right, you got to take another right, and then you're at our house. Thank you, Amanda. There's something simple about the fact that Jesus said, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. I think that he actually, by grace, made it so simple, but we battle it, we combat it as humans, wondering, well, what about everybody else? Why is it so exclusive? I think it leads to this next thought. Jesus is for all people, not just some people. This is the direct opposite of this statement, right? Where one is all exclusive, Jesus is actually all inclusive. He goes beyond cultural divisions in his own time. I think he meets us right here, right now, when we measure ourselves, whether or not we are worthy of sitting in a place of faith, whether we wrestled with being a poor human being last night or last year. Jesus is for all people all the time, right? If you've disqualified in your own mind or your own heart, any way, shape, or form, Jesus is for you. He cancels your own disqualification with his qualified being of his own character. And I love, this is really the definitive difference. This is where like the analogy of my parents being like Jesus break down. And this is why, because while everybody was invited in one season to come to my grandparents' home that my parents now occupy, my brothers and I abused that reality. We brought everybody to Mexico because it was awesome. When we were in college, we brought the whole college eventually ended up at my grandparents' house, and one person peed off the second-story balcony, and then nobody was invited anymore. So, my parents love the idea of having everybody over, but Jesus is actually proof that he wants everybody in with his dad's kingdom. Jesus displays it through John 11:25. He says this, I'm the resurrection and the source of all life. Those who believe in me will live even in death. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never truly die. Do you believe this? I love the verse ends with a question. And here's the deal. As much as you'd love to apply this directly to you, it's actually aimed at one person in Scripture. This question and that statement was aimed at Martha. brother and sister, siblings to Lazarus. And Martha had sent notice to Jesus to come because her brother was sick, ill, deathly ill. And Jesus, being such good friends with both Martha and Lazarus and Mary, he comes and they would see him as coming too late, 4 days after Lazarus passes away. And as Jesus rolls in, Martha meets Jesus before he gets to her home. And she says, "You're too late. Like, did you not know that he was in the condition he was in?" And this is the statement Jesus says, "I'm the resurrection, I'm the source of all life." Now, what can you apply to your life that I apply to my life? The simple fact that Jesus knows if you think something is past, something is expired, something is no longer an option, Jesus sees it as all possible in him. Was there a season of life that you experienced? Was there a time when you were connected to him in a way that you've never been able to connect with him since? Jesus would say, in me, I can deliver that life. I can bring back that connection. I can bring back together a relationship broken. I can be the healing presence and essence that will bring broken things in your life back together because I see him doing it here. He doesn't ask, do you believe this? He asked Martha, but man, I think we can stand up and we can get a little bit of that shine. Do I believe that Jesus is able to bring all life? Do I believe that he can resurrect things that I've just dismissed as gone and broken and dead? There's something really good about the person of Jesus and the claims that he makes. And here's what I'd love to clarify before we move past this, is that Jesus didn't raise Lazarus because of Martha's faith. You've got to know this. It wasn't because she was a good Christian. It wasn't because she signed up and served on all the opportunities. She didn't show up every Sunday and was like, Jesus, I'm here, right in my seat. Jesus heals Lazarus because he was acting in accordance with his Father's character and will. You have to realize that Jesus stands alone, a perfect reflection of the Father. And when you enter into his presence, you are a recipient of all that he stands for, namely the character and person of God the Father. That takes us to point number 3. Jesus is all about relationship, not religion. That whole exchange out of John 11 is because of the relational equity that was between Jesus and Martha and Mary and Lazarus. He was not looking at a roster, an Excel sheet, wondering if they had tithed, wondering if they were serving. Therefore, he was going to show up and do something great. He was operating in a rhythm of friendship. He is all about relationship. And when we put religion, namely this concept that we can earn our way into God's favor, we actually spoil the relationship that he's trying to create between us. The spaces where he's inviting us to partake in an exchange with him, we move to the side in exchange for something that we think we can systematically earn through religion. Look at Matthew 9. It says this. It's a snapshot of the way that Jesus interacted with people in his own time. It said, later, Jesus went to Matthew's home, note the place, in a house, to share a meal with him. And many other tax collectors and outcasts of society were invited to eat with Jesus and his disciples. And when those known as the Pharisees saw what was happening, they were indignant. That word indignant, it means to be angry, to be disgusted, to be full of annoyance. They were indignant and they kept asking Jesus' disciples, why would your master dine with such lowlives? Why would he spend time with them, those people, that class? I love that everything about Jesus points to relationship. In every verse above it, you hear this phrase, believe in me, know me, live in me, share a meal with me. You're invited to come and eat. It's part of the pillars by which we have built the dinner service is on this concept that Jesus invites us to a table to be in relationship with him. Now, I think it's important for us to understand when he's talking about the Pharisees, when those known as the Pharisees saw what was happening, we've got to understand the definition of those people. Sometimes it's just quickly run over. The definition by scholars would say that those were strict rule followers in Jewish culture, known to be self-righteous and hypocritical. And you're like, ooh, I don't like those people. Well, here's the truth. Most church goers are the definition of that. We actually have to protect ourselves from being hypocritical. We have to protect ourselves from going, well, I don't know if this is an expression of church, right? Dinner, I mean, that's a highly elevated moment of connectedness. Where's the worship, right? Where's the song? I need this for it to be qualified as a church service. And I would beg that we would excavate our own hearts, that we would examine our own hearts, we would dig deeply and ask if we are responding in a Pharisaic manner, that we would hold tightly to that which we prefer instead of welcome openly something that God might be able to work through in order to meet people in a way that we've never seen him meet before. I love that Jesus is all about relationship and not religion. And this is what's going to actually take us into observing Paul's life. This is where we jump into the book of Acts, chapter 17. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context. Acts 17, I'm reading it from the ESV. My hope is that you're hungry after this conversation and you go dig more, right? I'm giving you Costco samples. I want you to go buy the bulk item after you get through this. Because here's the deal. Paul does something tremendous. He's on mission. He's going city to city. He's waiting for two friends, two ride or die homies who are going to go into the city with him. But while he's in the city, he notices some things. I'm going to pick it up here, 17:16. In your Bible, you can read along with me. It says, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked with him as he saw the city full of idols. Now, me looking at this verse through my own lens, I'm like, oh, Paul's heart breaks. Oh, he's soft for people who are lost, right? That's my interpretation of this, and I have to guard myself not to lay my own lens over it. That word provoked means that he's angry. He's upset. He's upset because he knows a truth. He was an eyewitness to the person of Christ, and he's walked into a community that has no recognition of him, but is highly religious. So I love the perspective. When I'm upset, how can I react when I engage with people who don't believe as I do? Herein lies the application. You ready? Verse 17. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him. And some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities because he was preaching Jesus in the resurrection. This gives us some great clues as to how we can operate and live amongst people who don't believe the same as we do. The first one is this: be present. Be present. Show up. Be invested. Seek to understand. You want a super practical way that you can be present? When you're talking for understanding with somebody, put your phone down, right? Be fully present with somebody. I can't tell you how important it is. As I have gotten to know so many more people by being the pastor here, I realize how not present I am when I'm like, oh, hold on real quick. Oh, just somebody else. Don't worry about it. Being present means that you're fully engaged. And Paul is a great example of being fully present. He's observing. He starts in the temple and he makes his way all the way to the marketplace. He goes from church all the way to your office. And he's engaging, he's talking, he's listening, he's asking questions, he's giving perspective that he holds, and he's asking, what do you think about this? What do you feel about this? I love that Paul doesn't just hold the church, the temple, as the only place where he can discuss what he believes. It's a good challenge for us. Do you find yourself out of this place dialoguing with people about what you believe? I'll tell you a quick story I absolutely love. Yesterday, I was at Regent's Pizza with Daniel. Daniel and I go get lunch every now and then. We're down at Regent's, and one of the shift managers we've met several weeks ago, and I just felt like the Lord was saying, invite her to dinner service. That is a great person for this service. And I invited her, and she's like, oh yeah, maybe, sure, well, one day. Another friend, unbeknownst to me, invites her and brings her to dinner service. So I see her last week where Amanda's preaching. And she's there and she's listening. She's having a great time. And I check in with her and I'm so excited about what's going to happen. I don't know any of her backstory. Yesterday, we go back to Regent's Pizza. She's on the shift. She's leading like the whole team there. And before our dinner or lunch is done, she comes by and she goes, hey, I'm not like super religious. My parents grew up Catholic. But I was just wondering, see, I woke up this morning and I just felt like there was something heavy in me, and I'm not usually like that. Would you be willing to pray for me before you leave? And I'm thinking, oh, like what? Like, put my pizza down. Right? This is the same thing. Not just being here. Mingo doesn't live here. I'm out there with you. I live and I operate in this city. I want to take my witness, what I believe about Jesus bringing life, that verse. I live and I move and I operate in him out there. When somebody sees me out there, they're like, I can trust what I don't understand with what you believe, and I think there can be something solved there. Man, I was like, oh, girl, we're going in. We're going to pray right now. So don't make it awkward. So she goes and asks her team, can you cover for me? And Daniel and I, we walk outside over to the staircase. We just pray for her. Just pray that Jesus would show her something that she's never seen before. And as she walks into this faith, it's because she sees the fact that we've been present, that we've seen it, that we're about relationship. We're not pushing religion, that we understand that Jesus is for all people. She may not believe that she is a person that Jesus is for, but she's seeing us. And I was like, man, Jesus, thank you for showing me that I'm a part of this bigger story. And so be present. And then I love this out of Paul, show respect. Did you catch that quick line about where they said this babbler about Paul? Could you fathom if you're like bringing the best of your everything you know, everything you have learned, you're like trying to put it on a platter for other people to engage with, and they're like, this person makes absolutely no sense, right? I would be so offended, like, dang it, I didn't do this justice. And then I'd also be like, oh yeah, well, what you believe sucks, right? So I would break down, and I would be a lesser person. But Paul, engaging with people, they call him a babbler. And I love that Paul he goes in and he shows respect. He's in the know. He's very dialed into the place and the space that he's in. And we're going to see that as we finish reading this. It says this. It says that they took him, verse 19, and brought him to the Areopagus. And the Areopagus is essentially like the Athenian TED Talk arena, right? It's like everybody comes and drops their best thoughts in this room. Everyone's like robed in white, Birkenstocks, TED Talk. That's where Paul is at. And it says, they take him to the TED Talk of Athens, and they say, may we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting, for you bring something strange to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. Now, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. Sounds like TED Talks to me, right? So Paul, here's his address. Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, says, men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along, I observed the objects of your worship. I found also an altar with an inscription to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. Here comes Paul's big idea, verse 24. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gave to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God in the hope that they might feel their way toward him, best part, and find him. Yet, he is actually not far from each one of us. Paul quotes one of their philosophers and poets in verse 28, and he says, in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. I pray to Jesus that I have this kind of like mental awareness when I engage with people who don't believe the same way I do. That you would come in fully present, showing respect, and ready to dialogue in a way that brings just great value to the openness of the people that you talk to. I did a bunch of research about this whole like unknown God inscription thing. There's a philosopher and poet and seer named Epimenides in Athens. His name is Epimenides. He's a living person. And he's known as one of the 7 wise poets that the people of Athens continue to reach out to concerning their well-being. And when Athens comes under this great plague, they reach out to him in hopes that he might be able to save them from all of these people that are dying. And Epimendes comes from a different area. He brings a bunch of sheep with him, right? Not disciples, but like sheep, right? He brings sheep with him, and he starts releasing the sheep around Athens, and everywhere that the sheep eat the greenery around there, they're also eating the insects that are carrying this plague. And so as the sheep eat the insects and the plague starts to diminish, all the Athenians are attributing to Epimendes this altar and saying, to the unknown God, we worship the fact that we're not all dying. And I love that Paul comes in and says, you know that guy who came and did that thing with those animals, and you worship that action? My God made every person, including that guy who brought those sheep, who saved you. So the grace and the divinity and the sovereignty isn't from a man, it's actually from my God. He comes in and he connects the dots in the most gracious way. And I love that Paul, even in his discourse, he's serving their intellect. You realize this? He's serving them. He's serving them not just physically, but with their intellect. And I love in the next chapter, Paul goes on, and the Bible says that he continues in the mission, and he rolls up his sleeves, and he starts building tents. He's engaged mentally, and he's engaged physically. And this is the third fill-in. Be present, show respect, and serve. Serve. All of Acts 18, Paul is serving his way through the territory as he's doing mission work. The last one is this. It's, let me read Mark 10. I don't want to go over Mark 10, sorry. Mark 10 says this, whoever wants to be great must become a servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. That is what the Son of Man has done. He came to serve, not to be served, and then to give away his life in exchange for many who are held hostage. This was the image that we get depicted from Jesus. This is the actions that we follow out of Paul. And then finally, it's all wrapped up in love. When I think about serving and I think about love, I can't escape John 3:16, and we've read it a million times, but I'll read it again. For God expressed his love for the world, all inclusive. He expressed his love for the world in this way, that he gave. He gave what? He gave his only son so that whoever believes in him would not face everlasting destruction, but will have everlasting life. When you are compelled to give generously with your expertise or your time or your finances, you realize, I hope you realize, that you're giving as a reaction, not as a primary action, right? Sometimes our mentality is, Lord, I'm gonna give, I'm giving my time, I'm giving my money, I'm giving my expertise, but I'm not seeing anything reciprocated, and you have a wrong view of who was generous first. Jesus was generous first in giving his own life. God was generous first in giving his son. Anytime you give, it's actually, you are in the secondary role. It is not an action, it is a reaction to his first expression of generosity. So what do we ask ourselves then? Well, I think that we can apply this directly to us in one simple way. The challenge this week would be, think of a friend that you have that you do not see eye to eye with, and pray for your friend every day this week for 7 days. Commit to that simply. That costs you no money. It only costs you time. And I pray that you would at least step into that challenge. But here's the deeper version of that. That's like a freshman challenge. Here's the junior varsity version. Who do you need to be present with today? Who have you not given time to that when you do give time to, God would be honored? Who do you need to be present with today? Who do you need to show more respect to? Maybe it's somebody that you work with that you can't stand. I'm not asking you to stand them. I'm asking you to reflect the heart of Jesus and show respect, because it could build a bridge that leads that person to eternity. Who can you show more respect to? Here's the varsity challenge. Who and how are you going to serve as a reaction to the love that God has shown you? You know, every time we ask you to serve at the church, we're just trying to give you Costco samples. You realize that, right? We're just creating small ways that you can taste what it's like to embrace things like serving and giving, not because this is the end all. This is not the end all. It's what Jesus wants to be a part of your DNA, the rhythm. If you're going to be like him, people say, how did I be more like Jesus? I'm going to ask you to serve at the church as a small stepping stone to being somebody who serves naturally in life. I'm going to ask you to give according to your finances small at our church because God wants you to give and release everything according to his generosity to you. I'm going to ask you to lend your expertise small to our church as a taste. Do you go, oh my gosh, I really love building a deck and building farm tables. And now all these people are coming and having a dinner. I love to study. I get to teach. I love to sing. I love to set up tables. I love to do dishes. I love to cook. Nobody loves to do dishes. But people come and serve because it's a taste of what they expect God to show up and remind them of in their natural everyday life. That's my prayer for us as a church. That's my prayer as a person. That's my prayer for you as you go from this place understanding that you're a carrier of God's hope. Let me pray for us and then we'll take off. Jesus, I thank you so much. I thank you that you made claims that nobody else could make, and you backed it, Lord, with a resurrection that declared for all time and eternity that you conquered death. Lord, in that action, you took on our sin. You took on everything that we carry that we can't carry. And Lord, as we're invited to be disciples of yours, as we're invited to be apprentices of yours, to study you and to understand you with the intention to imitate, with the intention to do, Lord, would you show us where specifically you're inclining each of us to serve? Not thinking that we're serving you first in order to get something in return, Lord, but as a response because you first loved us. Help us to wrap our brains around that, wrap our hearts around that. And Lord, would those be the motivating factors that move our hands into action? I love you, Jesus. We're so thankful for this church called Torrey Pines, where we get to come and discover more about you. Where from this place we get to go and represent you, Lord. Be with us. We love you, Jesus. In your name I pray. Amen.